Basic Brewing Radio is sponsored in part by the American Homebrewers Association. The American Homebrewers Association invites you to celebrate the 24th annual Learn to Homebrew Day on Saturday, November 5th. Visit homebrewersassociation.org/basicbrewing to download the official recipe for a small batch hoppy amber ale. Find a homebrew supply shop and dust off your homebrewing skills with how-to videos. Plus, you'll get a promo code for $5 off an annual American Homebrewers Association membership when you make a pledge to participate in Learn to Homebrew Day. That's homebrewersassociation.org/basicbrewing to get $5 off when you make the Big Brew Pledge by November 8th, 2022. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, October 20th, 2022. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, it's been 5 years since we've sampled beers with Rose Schweikhart of Superior Bathhouse Brewery in Hot Springs National Park, and her business has grown by leaps and bounds since then. We'll sit in Rose's beer garden and share some beers with old friends. If you go to basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows, and if you go to basicbrewingshop.com, you can find our DVDs and our Brewers Logbooks. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Basic Brewing and find our show page on Facebook as well. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing, and many thanks to everybody who's helping out in that way. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. Financial supporters have already seen the video episode that I'm posting on Friday to the general public. It's my mead that I flavored with tinctures of jalapeno and strawberry. It was dang good and very simple to make. It started off to be a clone of Gronfeld's Root of All Evil ginger mead, but the ginger root that I got at the grocery store was old, it was dried out, and it was practically flavorless. So I dumped that tincture and I switched gears. It really does pay to get fresh ingredients. Instead, I used strawberries and homegrown jalapeno slices, and the product, in the end, was very nice. I've been fermenting sliced jalapenos because our one jalapeno plant went crazy this year. I smoked a bunch of them and turned them into a jalapeno powder after dehydrating them. That stuff is amazing in chili, in soups, and cornbread and stuff. And by the way, if you look in the Patreon archives at patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can find a video showing how I did that. I also recently made a brine and did a lactic fermentation of a ton of them. I did 3 batches, each of them in about a quart of brine. They came out really nice and tart and a bit salty, and they'll keep over the winter. So I'm like my grandma all of a sudden. Soon I'll be canning squash and putting it in the root cellar. On the brewing front, I brewed the base beer for the holiday ale that Chris Colby and I brainstormed last time. The Wort tasted amazing. Steve Wilkes and I are planning to get together to sample some spice tinctures to use in that beer. I brewed a 2-gallon batch, and I looked at some similar recipes that I've brewed in the past that I looked up in my Basic Brewing Brewer's Logbook. I was afraid it was going to be too low based on those old recipes for my starting gravity, so I added a pound or 450 grams of base malt. And I'm glad I did because I did hit the target gravity almost exactly. Chris's estimate for the original recipe was 1085, and mine was actually 1083. So my stovetop brew-in-a-bag method isn't as efficient as his system and his recipes normally that he does. I decided to go with A09 Pub for yeast from our friends and sponsors at Imperial Organic Yeast. I pitched early in the afternoon, and the airlock was bubbling well before bedtime. It's a small batch, but a fairly high-gravity one, The airlock smelled really good. The dark malts combined with the esters coming off of that English yeast, they're going to be really delicious together, I think. I'm thinking now that I'll split this batch and only flavor half of it with the tinctures. Anyway, We love Imperial Organic Yeast with 200 billion cells in each easy-to-open package. I like to say that my stir plate is dusty because I don't use it anymore for moderate gravity 5-gallon batches or even higher gravity 2-gallon batches. And cider lovers, be sure to ask your homebrew store for A40GF bubbles to get a super clean fermentation that lets your fruit flavors shine through. Check out all the details on all of Imperial's strains at imperialyeast.com. That's imperialyeast.com. Okay, I have to give you a little background on this interview. We recorded sitting outside in the sun on Arlington lawn beside the Superior Bathhouse Brewery in Rose's little beer garden there. There was a ton of people around us, and there was a speaker right behind me playing music. Although with the microphone setting that I used, you don't hear a lot of that. And I've learned that through, recording at Great American Beer Festival and HomebrewCon and such as that. If you turn the volume of the mic down and put it right in people's faces, it turns out all right. And we were sitting at the table with Rose and two friends that I've known since the 70s. So all that to say, I was a little loud and hyper at first. But I calmed down a little bit. Luckily, Rose loves to talk about beer. She knows a lot about beer, and she and her team of almost 50 people now have grown this little brewery into something pretty fun and amazing. And keep your ears open for Rose's triangle theory about brewing IPAs. Rose Schweikhart, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thank you, James. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's good. It's good for us to be here as well. Here we are we're at the Superior Bathhouse Brewing on Central Avenue in Hot Springs National Park, Arkansas. We're sitting in the beer garden, which formerly was a part of Arlington Lawn. I'm leaving that in. But you've taken it over.
I have. We've been here for 10 years, but a big part of my initial lease and negotiation with the Park Service was to include this 50 feet away from the building. So we took every inch of it to build our patio back in March. We just opened it March of 2022.
Wow. Well, it's too bad you couldn't have, for various reasons, it's too bad you couldn't have opened it like a couple years before. But, with COVID and stuff.
Well, yeah, it's been in the initial plan since, day one, but we had to be ready. First of all, need it as a business. We had to be ready for it structurally, personnel-wise, equipment-wise, and production-wise. And then COVID happened, and that made it kind of hard to make too many decisions. But once we realized that was going to be a short-term situation and we could get through the pandemic, and operate as usual, I initiated the process of approval with the park. Took a lot of work and a lot of documents going back and forth to get permission to do this. But yeah, we built a 2,500 square foot patio on federal property adjacent to my brewery, which is in a historic former bathhouse on federal property. So
we're drinking beer in the national park, and there's a green box, a green concrete and metal box, not just a few feet away from us, which is a capped hot springs. So we're right here in the national park. You've got a capped hot springs in your brewery, and for those who are not familiar, you actually brew with water from the mineral springs, from the hot springs that comes out of the ground at 140 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, that's right. The reason I'm willing to go through multiple years of paperwork to do basically anything is because, we have the world's only potable thermal spring water source, and that's because we're federally regulated. And we were lucky enough to be able to put in a proposal to create a craft brewery here in this national park. And the point of going through all these hoops and cutting through this red tape was so that we could commercially produce beer using the thermal spring water. And yeah, we're the only brewery in the world brewing our beer with the thermal spring water.
And y'all need to go back to the archives and find the interview where I got you on a conference call with John Palmer, and I have to say that you were notably starstruck. So, and John went through your water profile and you all talked about using the water for brewing. It really was a lot of fun to do.
It was very interesting. I was a little baby brewer back then and still going through the trauma of, again, opening a restaurant and a brewery on federal property. But about 6 years later, everything's gotten a little easier, and I feel like I would almost love to have that conversation with John Palmer again, now that we know what we're doing.
Well, I know somebody, so I have him on my phone. Not to name drop, but we're also here with guys that I've known since way before I care to admit. First of all, we have Kelly Dodson, whose name you hear at the end of every audio podcast, and he's drinking a root beer today. Kelly, how's the root beer?
It's wonderful.
There you go. There's the tasting notes from Kelly. And at the opposite side of the table is my good friend Scott Schlimgen, who I've known since 7th grade, 1977. Yeah, we have a Schweikhart and a Schlimgen. Scott, I was your best man. You were my best man, and now here we are drinking. What do you think? First of all, you are an architect, and your specialty is historical architecture. What do you think about sitting here on Arlington lawn, not Amazon lawn, drinking beer beside a restored bathhouse?
I hope to see more of this kind of thing happening down here. It's wonderful to imagine they could turn something like an abandoned bathhouse into a brew house, and I'd love to see more of that happening in some of these other buildings.
Do you remember much about now, I have to say that you have limited vision. So it'd be interesting because your tasting notes, they say that people who lose one of their senses, the other senses become stronger. Is that true or is that BS?
What did you say?
All right. So, but do you remember the style of the building of Superior?
I remember that the building is made out of red brick, and I remember like shallow arches off of piers along a kind of a porch along the front of the building. If I recall, then it steps back to perhaps a second story behind that. Is that right? Is that this one?
That's pretty accurate. I would say the most interesting thing about the architecture of the Superior Bathhouse here is that there was an existing building that was standing. It was called the Superior Hotel. It was all stick-built wood construction, late Victorian commercial-style architecture. And in the early 1900s, there were fires in downtown Hot Springs that wiped out many, many city blocks. And so this building has always been federally owned, this area. So the federal government actually tore down a perfectly good existing structure called the Superior Hotel and rebuilt the current building in 1916, and it was built to be fireproof construction. So it is all reinforced concrete. The floors, the ceilings, even the roof deck is reinforced concrete, and all the interior walls are tile brick, which is it's a terracotta brick, but they're these triple hollow bricks covered in plaster. The only wood in the whole building are the window frames, window casings, and the door casings, stuff like that, to this day. So it's a really interesting building, but I love how that the construction tells the story of Hot Springs and how the park, it wasn't even a national park yet in 1916. We were a U.S. Federal Reserve, but the point of the rebuilding was to build a building that was perhaps fire resistant or fireproof. We didn't even have fire sprinkler systems yet, but the point was to build a building out of rock. So my joke is it's tile, plaster, marble, brick, concrete, and glass. So those are pretty unflammable surfaces.
Yeah, knock wood. There's no wood around here, but knock all those things you made.
Right, there's no wood to knock on, but yeah.
Knock all those materials that you just cited. So we have two flights of beer into the topic of the show. We have two flights of beers in front of us. One is a flight that you recommended from Tex, and I think that the first one is a Dunkel. Is that correct?
The first beer on your flight is it's a classic Dunkel. It's a German style Dunkel. We use the Weihenstephaner yeast on that. Basically, the guys built it to use all German malts, hops, and, like I said, the classic yeast for a dunkel, and that's what I'm drinking right now. I'm not drinking a flight. I have a full one of these. This is my third full one of these, so I'm very wordy right now. Very verbose, I think is the word.
That's good. So I don't have to talk as much.
Yeah, no, I have lots to say about it. Now, this dunkel is really cool. So we make every year around this time. We make some Oktoberfest themed beers and food to go with it. So it's kind of a fun time of year too. We like that fest atmosphere when the weather's changing and that, god awful summer heat is maybe hopefully starting to turn down. So we try to make these fall beers. So the Dunkel is a new one we've never made before, but we brew this. We had a special guest brewer, Laura Miller, is the park superintendent, and she's a beer fan. So she wasn't in her official uniform or anything, but she came and helped us brew this, and it turned out really great. But it is a classic. I would call it a chestnut color. It's dark. It's deeper than an amber. It's darker than our Oktoberfest, which is a classic Marzen fest beer style. But this Dunkel is, definitely call it a chestnut color, and it's a little bit sweeter, a little bit thicker on the mouthfeel. So we didn't let the yeast attenuate all the way. It's a yeast that leaves a little bit of unfermented sugar left. So we have that sweetness, which really brings out the caramel flavor, and a little bit of German hops. It's not very hoppy in contrast to our Oktoberfest, actually our Oktoberfest beer, which is our Marzen, which is a little bit more in the amber color and hoppier and a bit drier. So they're very similar at first sip, but as you delve into them, there's a distinct difference, and I'm glad we went through the exercise of making the two, because it's cool.
Yeah, it's delicious. It's very clean as far as the yeast character. There's a teeny bit of candy sweetness, but not something where it's cloying at all. And there's a little bit of malty caramel or caramel flavor, and I could have 3 full-size ones as well. It's delicious.
Yeah, exactly. I think this one has the robar, which is roasted barley. Not much of it, but just enough to bring out that. It's definitely chocolate characteristic without being too dark. And Munich 60 Cara Munich, that's the darker Munich malt. Cara Munich, a tiny bit of robar, and like I said, the Weihenstephaner yeast. And I want to say the hops are Tetanang. Oh. So yeah, we got all German ingredients on that one.
Very traditional.
Yeah.
Now Scott's almost to the end of your first one there. Now you've got a darker beer, but you're shaking your head because you say you're afraid because you don't have the beer words. So what are you tasting, Scott?
In which of these?
The first one, the one in your hand.
One here.
It's a dark beer. I've forgotten what we've got.
It may be a dark beer. It's the sweetest of the 4. It feels to me that I'm tasting. It's probably the hardest one for me to describe of these, except that somehow the taste of this is sweeter. I'm guessing this is either the oatmeal stout or the porter. It's one of the two, probably, between this and this.
Yeah, you are in fact drinking our porter. It's we call it Camp Smorwood, and this is one of our. We don't make a lot of novelty beers, but that is one of our novelty beers, and we decided to emulate the flavor of s'mores over the campfire.
That's what I was tasting.
Are you tasting that?
Yeah, as I said, it's the sweetest of all of these. For sure. This is then the oatmeal stout, correct? And this is one I was tasting more of a sense of maple to it somewhere down in there, almost, the hint of something I would remember, maple syrup maybe. Probably be very good on a stack of pancakes, this one.
So Scott was asking what oatmeal brings to an oatmeal stout.
Yeah, well, oatmeal is a big source of protein that actually ends up in the final beer, so that oatmeal contributes to your mouthfeel and also your head retention. So like I'm seeing, and these flights have been sitting here for a minute, so we're getting a little warmer, we're getting a little flatter. We are outside, it's about 82 degrees right now. So not the ideal beer tasting environment, but it is the ideal hanging out environment. So I'm going to stick to that story.
So
but
head retention is what I should get out of this, because if I drink too many of these, I think I might lose my head.
Yes, we'll go straight to your head. Now, that's our Foul Play Stout. That is a classic oatmeal stout. We put 50 pounds of oats in every batch. And the oats, again, it's a source of protein, which contributes to the way it kind of feels in your mouth, that mouth feel, which is a weird word. And also that the head retention. And for some reason, stouts, when you use the oatmeal, really get a nice, in my opinion, nice like beige color to the head, to the bubbles. So, like, I'm proud of that. It's not just a white head; it's a beige head. Sorry, I don't know. Okay.
Now, I can't remember our conversation with John, but with yeah, it has been. I don't even want to look at how long it's been. But how much work do you have to do with the different styles? I mean, with your water profile, there's a ton of minerals in it. Which beer styles do you have to work the hardest to accommodate?
Yeah, so my theory, it's very interesting, and you can edit this out if you need to. But so when I first did my podcast, or the podcast with you, like I want to say 7 years ago, I think it was 2015. Yeah, a long time ago with John Palmer, who is one of the experts in the world on beer water chemistry and is kind of an icon to homebrewers, but also, of course, professional brewers, because did all this legwork and science on the water chemistry. So I remember doing this podcast with him, and we were talking about how we could take what my base water profile is and turn it into beer, like water profiles that would be perfect for certain styles. So I remember John recommending maybe a northeast England style brown ale, as we could take the bicarbonate level and add the gypsum and all this. It was all this stuff, and like that's all very, very cool. And I'll get to this, but there are some beers that we do a lot of modifications to. But as a business philosophy and as a brewer, we got past the initial shock of opening a brewery on federal property and, being very successful and it being very difficult. A couple years into brewing, my current philosophy is that this is our water, and we are the only brewery in the world that makes our beer with thermal spring water. When you're drinking our beer, it is made with thermal spring water. Okay? So this water profile, which does work for many, many styles, is my water, and it does have a flavor that comes through to me. I can taste it. I can pick it out of a lineup, out of a final beer. So my philosophy has been that this is our special beer. We're the only people in the world using this water, and we're going to preserve this as much as we can. So most beers we don't do very much modification to, except without going into a geology lesson, this water has been percolating from rainwater that fell 4,000 years ago, goes down into this aquifer, and then slowly trickles up as the continental plates are shifting, and this geothermal gradient slowly heats this water as it goes from, I think it's like 5,000 feet into the earth. Anyway, it takes 4,000 years for this water to land as rain and then go back and come back up, and it's 143 degrees. But what happens is this water is going through shifting, basically limestone plates. And you guys can't see it because this is audio only, but we are sitting at the base of North Mountain in Hot Springs. This is where the mountain tower is, if you've ever been to the mountain tower. And this mountain behind us, literally behind the building where we're sitting, is slowly shifting over time upwards. This is one of the oldest mountain ranges in the country. And that friction of those literally continental plates is what causes the heat of the water. And these are limestone plates. It's what causes, there's actually tufa rock formations, which is basically like a bubbly limestone at the surface. So all that to say, our water has a high concentrate of bicarbonate, calcium bicarbonate, which causes an alkalinity in the water. So let me get to the point. If you're a water nerd and a home brewer, our water is a little bit out of ideal range alkalinity-wise for brewing. But the rest of the minerals are pretty much in spec. As far as like salts, we basically have a blank slate mineral-wise for brewing, but the alkalinity is a little bit high because of that bicarbonate spike in our water profile. So what we have to do to adjust that is we add a little bit of acid. We use lactic acid, but you can use citric acid too. Either one. We've actually had to substitute citric acid for supply chain issues. You've heard that word a lot in the last few years. But so most of our beers, all we do is tweak that pH down a little bit, but we're keeping the water as is because I like the flavor of the water. It's kind of cool to drink, and in our final beer, it has a certain taste that I enjoy. So my business philosophy, my brewing philosophy is that we are the only ones in the world making beer with this water. We might as well let it happen, except that alkalinity is a little bit out of spec, but that's not a big flavor change. We just tweak that alkalinity down. So back to your original question, 5 minutes later, is that the original question was that do we do much to the water to make beer, and what styles do we have to tweak? Okay, when we start getting really hoppy, that's when we have to add those salts back in and knock back that bicarbonate amount. So, for example, our Space Force is our hazy IPA, and we have one now called Wookiee Shake, which is a double hazy Space Force. You've got one there. Careful with that one. That's a good one. And even our Northwoods IPA and our Candy Mountain, which is our dry hop pale ale, we have to tweak that a little bit. So we do add some of those salts back in. We don't go full Burton on Trent profile where you can stand the water up in a stalagmite on your table, but we do have to add some of those salts back in just to get the utilization of the hops that we want. But our basically, if you're having one of our beers that isn't very aggressively hopped, it's all we do is adjust the pH just a little bit.
There's always something fun and delicious at the website of our friends and sponsors, Ricky and Kelly of Groenfell.com. Now, on Groenfell.com, you can find a mercantile shop, or is it mercantile shop, with food products made from Groenfell and Havoc meads. You can find Wild Hunt spiced cranberry mead jelly, Chaos Sizer apple vanilla mead jelly, Root of All Evil ginger mead jelly, and Psychopomp sour cherry mead jelly. And there are mustards. Root of All Evil Dijon-style mustard, and Old Wayfarer Stone Ground mustard. Ricky says customers are really excited. And you can order Golden Apple of Discord Oak-Aged Apple Mead. But hurry, for this sizer, they only made a couple of barrels of that. So on top of all that, all of the ancient collection meads are now available at the same time. So save money with case discounts as you have these shipped to you across the country. Find out all the delicious details at family-owned and operated Groenfell.com. That's Groennfell. Well, I'm drinking a hoppy beer right now. This is number 2 on my list.
Who is number 2? 1 sec. Sorry. Oh, Lola's. Wait, no. Let me smell it. Oh yeah, that's Lolo's. Yeah, that's a saison. That's a French saison. It's the classic French saison yeast, and that one's cool. We make that once in a while. We let it stay hazy. That's a yeast that doesn't flocculate really hard, so it's a kind of a hazy saison, and it's a classic French saison. So pretty low on the coloring grains. It's probably mostly Pilsen, a little bit of wheat, and maybe a little bit of like carapils or something like that for head attention. But it's low hops. We let the yeast do the talking on that one.
So what I thought was hop character is yeast character, and it's really spicy. There's a lot of cinnamon character. I get on my palate I get almost like a Christmas spice level of cinnamon character.
Yeah, well, that's one of those yeasts that puts out that clove ester, which is very prominent. And as it warms up, well, you just finished it, but you definitely get a little bubble gum out of that one too. But that's that classic clovey saison yeast.
Yeah, it's delicious. Did
you like it? Okay.
I liked
cool.
it a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the spice character is very prominent, and it's almost. Again, it's not a sweet beer, but there's a candy character to it that makes it really drinkable and really approachable.
Yeah, thank you. I love that's one that I love right now. We don't make it year round, but that's one we actually take take that yeast and we will repitch that yeast into a beer that's going to have Brett eventually. So we like to use that as an initial yeast. So when you do a Brett beer, I won't talk for 10 minutes about this, but about once a year we do a batch of a Brett beer where we start with one initial yeast and let it kind of ferment out, kind of like in homebrew terms we call it a primary fermentation. Once we have that initial consumption of the sugars by the initial yeast, and that French Saison yeast is great for that, but it leaves plenty of room to transfer that to a new tank and pitch Brett into that, and that's when we'll let sit for 9 to 12 more months, and then we can really get a good Brett finish off of that. So that's one. We don't have it on tap right now, but we do. Actually, I will see if I can find you one to try while you're still here today. But we have. Yeah, that's one that makes a great Brett companion yeast. It's French. It's a French Saison yeast. I think we get it from White Labs, but I'm pretty sure you can get that pretty much the equivalent from Y Yeast or BSI, anybody. So.
Well, it was delicious. Scott, you the other two beers that you had were, I believe, an American Pale Ale and an IPA. Both hoppy beers. What did you think of the hoppy beers?
Well, I'm a fan of hoppy beers, and I tend to drink IPAs. I live in Italy. They've just finally discovered them over there, so now we're getting So now finally, I have something to drink over there that I enjoyed. They were very different from one another, and I'm going to guess the one that was the American Pale Ale had a bit of a. I would have to say, if I had to identify it with something, I would say almost a sense of apple. There was something that just reminded me of an apple, whereas what was your West Coast styled IPA was just very classic. I had a sense of resin, which I rather like, whatever that's associated with, because I don't know anything about beer. Without what I often find in those beers is a sense of kind of bitter citrus, kind of like grapefruit, which I actually quite like, but I didn't taste that at all in this one. So I like them both. Probably what I imagined was the India Pale Ale I liked better, but that's just because that's what I'm particularly fond of.
What do you think, Rose?
Well, so I love that description because what he was describing was our classic Northwest style IPA, our Northwoods IPA, and the other one was our Candy Mountain. It's our dry hopped APA, so we call that an American Pale Ale. The distinction, there's two big distinctions. They're both dry hopped, but the Northwoods IPA, I really love a good, what I would call a classic IPA style. I think you use that same word too. So call it the Northwest style of IPA, and it's your typical. It's lighter than amber but darker than a blonde. So a little bit of caramel malt in there. And the hops we use are your classic American hops. So I'm pretty sure we're still using Cascade/Centennial. Again, supply chain changes sometimes, but that's the beer we're trying to make. Your typical IPA. Let's just call that a base IPA. It's not a hazy. It's not. We do dry hop that one, and the reason you dry hop is to get the aroma and the flavor you want without the bitterness. But it is an IPA, and there is bittering hops in the boil. So we do the I think a 60 and a 30-minute boil schedule in the Northwoods, but it gets hit with a dry hop as well. But that dry hop happens at the very end of the fermentation process. I want to say it's Cascade hops. So it's that classic piney flavor, Northwest flavor. And then the other beer you're talking about with that you described as an apple flavor, it is very fruity. That's our Candy Mountain. And that's our American Pale Ale. That's my other favorite beer that I love right now. And asking me to pick my favorite beer is like asking someone to pick their favorite child or their favorite dog, for example. Like it's whoever isn't bothering you right now. So that those two are my favorite. But that was a weird aside. But yeah, the Candy is a dry hopped APA. We use Sabro hops, and Sabro hops are known for kind of a coconut or a passion fruit flavor, like very tropical, very fruity. So, and that one is also dry hopped. It's a clear one, so it's not. You all can't see with your ears, but Candy and Northwoods are both. We don't filter, but we clarify them, and they're both dry hopped. But that that Candy APA, we dry hop in a way that it is just to bring out that aroma hop, so it's a higher temperature dry hop, and get that with the Sabro hops. And Sabros I just love anything with Sabro.
So Scott, out of the 4 beers that now you're done with your flight, we're over here talking and you've been drinking.
I've been dragging it out just so that I wouldn't finish it before you were done with your recording here.
Out of those 4, which is the one that you would be most likely to order again?
You know what? Maybe I would get that oatmeal stout again because I drink a lot of IPAs or pale ales, and so I'm more familiar with them. And I would probably go with the oatmeal stout if I were to have a whole beer. Now I've been thinking it was a really good variety. I think I just got lucky. I got luckier. I chose the right beer.
Now, I'm drinking my last 2 beers are hazy or cloudy, and I say this to every brewer who serves me a delicious hazy beer that hazy beers are going to ruin the craft beer industry. He said jokingly.
I almost want to print hats that say make IPAs clear again. I think that'd be really funny, but their hats are green, and I don't know. No, I actually, the hazy thing, I have to tell a story, and you can edit this whole thing out, and it never happened. But I want to say about 5 years ago, so our brewer is Jim Powell, and he's been our brewer since day one, and makes all these amazing beers. I actually just sign checks and talk about the beers. So, but, I still get to talk about them, so here I am. So Jim and I went to San Diego in 2017. We went to White Labs to take their Yeast Essentials course, which is a class. It's a 3-day intensive. It's classroom and laboratory experience for brewers, and it was about using yeast and utilizing yeast. So we roll into San Diego and, of course, go immediately to the first brewery that's as close to our hotel as possible. And here is a hazy IPA in the menu, and that had not made it to Arkansas yet, and we were like, wow, what is happening here? Because IPAs are traditionally pretty clear, or at least unfiltered, so they're clearer as they age. But here we are having this hazy IPA and wondering wow, this is a thing. And so San Diego, if you're not familiar, has over 200 breweries. They had 199 at the time when we visited. We're like, wow. And every brewery we went to in San Diego, which was not 199, but at least 30 in 5 days. And they all had these hazy IPAs. We're like, this is going to be a hot style. So we knew when we came back we were going to start designing a hazy IPA. And it's our, as a quick aside, it's our number one seller still to this day. So
see, that's what everybody says. I joke that hazy beers are going to ruin the craft beer industry, and the brewers always say, well, our customers don't think so.
Yeah, they're not. No, it's not ruining anything by far. On my spreadsheets will tell you it's not ruining anything. But no, I know what you mean. It is a weird style. But we had a moment where we were at a brewery. It was called Fall, F-A-L-L Brewery, somewhere in San Diego, and we're sitting there having a beer and watching a brewer do something really interesting that I'd never seen before. So we start to talking to this brewer who's doing his thing, and turns out he was setting up a dry hop loop, and he was actually adding his hops into looked like a kind of a rocket ship. Turns out it's called a hop rocket. So he was adding his hops, hydrating them with beer, all under pressure, under CO2. Got to make sure the oxygen doesn't get in. And then setting up a recirculating loop. And he said that he recirculates this he recirculates this fermenting beer for 24 hours. And turns out what makes the haze, it's not just yeast that hasn't settled yet, it's a result of biotransformation, which is when your hops and the acid that the hops produce and the proteins from the grain all kind of bond into this molecule that is, persistent in the liquid, but it's not so large and heavy that it falls to the bottom. So when you get a hazy IPA, it's not just yeast that never flocculated. It's a lot more than that. So this really awesome brewer guy at Fall Brewery told us that. So when we got home, we're going to make the first hazy IPA in Arkansas, and I really think we put out the first hazy IPA in Arkansas because we had just been to San Diego and made this. But so that's how Space Force was born. Space Force is our normal hazy, and it is about 7.5%. We add a little bit of lactose to that. It does have oatmeal, so back to that mouthfeel thing. And it has 42 pounds of blood orange puree added. So when you taste a Space Force and get an orange character, it's literally from blood orange puree.
It's called Space Force?
Yes. So Space Force is our hazy we've been making, and it's still our number one seller. But what James is drinking right now is our Wookiee Shake. So Wookiee Shake was an attempt to make a double Space Force. It's not truly double, so it's not. Space Force is 7.5%, so it's not 15%, but it is elevated quantity of grain and more hops. I think we used twice the hops as we used in Space Force, and a whole bunch of lactose, almost twice the amount of lactose. And lactose is, real quick aside, is a sugar that is persistent all the way to the final beer. Lactose is a molecule that's so complex that yeast can't really dissolve it. Yeast can't process it. So if you want your final beer to have a sweetness and a chewiness, we're getting to our name, chewy. This beer is real chewy.
I get it.
Yeah, Wookiee Shake, it's chewy. Right, so we kind of doubled all the ingredients in this beer and ended up with about a 9.5% hazy IPA, and we called it Wookiee Shake because it is chewy, Wookiee chewy, right? And the shake part is the milkshake. It's a lactose IPA. So.
Well, it's super drinkable. I mean, it does have a solid mouthfeel, but it's not sweet like I guess it's because there's so much hops in there. There's so much counteractive bitterness. It's not like drinking a milk stout, which is a sweet beer on purpose. You probably need that lactose in there to provide a counterbalance to the amount of hops because it's super juicy. But at the same time, it's nicely balanced in its flavors so that it is drinkable. I wouldn't have I say this every time, but I wouldn't have thought that it was that much alcohol. It's way good.
Well, thank you. So I'd like to talk about my IPA triangle, and this is my personal theory, is that to make an IPA, you have to. There's 3 points you have to balance. You have to make a triangle, basically an isosceles triangle. And the 3 points on the triangle are hoppiness, so bitterness, and then alcohol, and then sweetness. And that to me that's a triangle. So if you had a camera right now, I would look really stupid. But I'm forming a triangle with my hands.
You're doing the delta thing.
Yes, I'm doing a weird gang sign right now. But
or sorority sign.
Yes, right. Yes, but what I'm trying to. So, I think that triangle can scale. So, let's say you want to make a brute. Remember brute IPAs from a couple of years ago?
10 minutes. For 10 minutes, they were popular.
Yeah, that was a hot flash in the pan, but we made one. And okay, so our sugar, that's our sweetness is low. It's a dry IPA, but then there's only so much you can hop it before it's too much, and then that alcohol has to balance it out. So that's why, I think some session IPAs work. So you have to, if you want a session IPA, we're still doing those, but that's kind of the low calorie thing. So we want a lower alcohol beer, let's say a 4% pale ale. But I think you can hop up the hoppiness, the bitterness, just to where it balances out the sweetness as well. So if you're going for a lower calorie or low mouthfeel, a light mouthfeel beer, you can only make it so hoppy. Otherwise, it's too astringent and it tastes wrong. If it's not sweet enough and it's not hoppy enough, then you just taste that alcohol, and that's a hotness that you don't want. That's a bad flavor in beer too. Here's that triangle. But when you really expand the triangle, I'm doing this big stupid thing with my arms right now. You can have 120 IBU, 9 to 10% alcohol, but then you got to balance that triangle with the sweetness. That's where that lactose comes in. So I think you can really make that happen, but that beer has to have that residual sweetness in it, to balance out the hotness of the alcohol, the bitterness of the IPA. You have to scale that.
So the sweet spot is in the center of the triangle, or everything is balanced within those parameters of that.
Yeah, the sweet spot is where all 3 points of the triangle are expanding or shrinking together. So you want to get hoppier, we need a little higher alcohol, you need a little higher sweetness or mouthfeel or really, that's an attenuation issue. So either you leave residual sugar or you add lactose, so where it's still sweet. If you get a beer, the worst thing to me is a beer that is super duper dry, totally hoppy, and really hot on the alcohol. That's not an isosceles triangle anymore. Now we're in Crazyland. It's not. You kind of need that sweetness. And I don't even really I don't love beers that are super sweet, but I appreciate the balance. I think that balance is important, and that's my IPA triangle, and I'll go to the grave with that.
No, it's a great description. It's because there's a backbone. You got to have a backbone to balance everything else up. Our friends Desiree and Dave from HighGravityBrew.com for their awesome Warthog electric brewing gear. But they also have delicious ingredient kits. A lot of them have been thoroughly tested at Pippin's Tap Room at High Gravity in Tulsa. And right now, there are some really fun seasonal kits that you should pick up at HighGravityBrew.com. For example, Ichabod Pumpkin Ale. This spiced beer is inspired by Tulsa Brewing Company's Old Pumpkinhead. The brewpub is no longer in business, but their recipe is a frequent request from Tulsa customers that want to recreate one of their favorite holiday beers. Revelry and Merriment Holiday Ale is a special seasonal kit for 2022. This year's beer is a malty beer. It's an amber beer infused with dried Montmorency cherries, vanilla, maple syrup, and cinnamon. The finished beer has notes of caramel and toasted bread from the malts. And Old St. Nick Ale. This kit is inspired by Avery's Old Jubilation Ale with mocha and toffee flavors and a hint of hazelnut. Check these out along with all the other tasty kits and the Build Your Own Beer page if you want to follow your own recipe. That's at family-owned and operated HighGravityBrew.com. That's HighGravityBrew.com. This is another hazy beer. What do we got?
Okay. Actually, so that one's not usually hazy, but I think we just tapped a new keg.
Oops.
So no.
This beer is perfectly clear.
Yeah. No, it's okay. So we don't filter. We use biofine and let beers drop out. So sometimes when we tap a new keg, it does get some. So that is a beer that's hazy because there's yeast in your glass right now. So we're a small brewery. We're not a production brewery. So.
I'm getting my vitamin B right now.
It is. It happens, but it's not super trashy. It doesn't look like a. It
just looks like one of my beers.
It doesn't look like a protein shake. So we're okay. But that's Candy Mountain. So that's the one. That's one that Scott had mentioned.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, that's one of the Sabro. That's the dry hopped Sabro beer.
It's really good. It's unfair. I tasted them out of order. I should have done the Wookiee beer last, but. So I'm a little challenged, my palate's a little blown by but yeah. I get the dominant characteristic I get is orange on this one, just from my first couple sips.
I like that. Well, you said orange, he said apple, and I really get a passion fruit out of it.
Try comparing
too,
those.
So.
Huh?
Try comparing those. It's like apples and oranges.
Just like apples and oranges. Well, hey, taste really can be a little bit subjective, so that's true. All of our collective memories about tastes and smells really affects everyone's personal opinion about beers. So that's kind of interesting.
And side by side, you really do taste the extra mouthfeel backbone of the previous beer, the Wookiee beer. You really do, the presence of the lactose in the previous beer wasn't apparent when I was drinking it, but now I'm drinking this. I'm not saying it feels thin, but it's certainly thinner. Mm-hmm. Well, Rose, I know you're super busy. And you're welcome to spend more time with us. But I want to give you the option if you need to. I want to unplug us so that if you need to, you can run about and do other things. I'm so grateful to you for spending this much time on a busy Friday afternoon. This place is packed. It's beautiful outside. We got some cloud cover. The sun is starting to go down behind the mountain, so it's unseasonably warm, but there's a breeze blowing. If you're in Hot Springs National Park, Arkansas, of course you got to come by Superior Bathhouse Brewing. And if the weather's nice, come sit on the patio, and you might get to meet Rose.
It's possible you might get to meet Rose. Yeah, you just have to know somebody.
Kelly, how was your root beer?
It's called Space Horse.
No, the root beer is not called Space Force. No. The root beer is
But
called
the triangle scales.
root beer. No triangle on the root beer. The root beer is just root beer.
I'm confused.
Okay.
We got to start over.
Kelly's a
lost
smart is what Kelly is.
Okay.
We need to get Kelly a beer. Scott, thanks for spending time with us and drinking. I might buy you some more beers after this.
I didn't know you were buying these to begin with, so this sounds better all the time.
They got my credit card.
Oh, all right. Well, thanks for having us along, and it was so nice to meet you again, Rose.
Absolutely, Scott. Hey, I never got to talk about the s'mores wood.
The what?
The s'more wood. I'd like to talk.
We'll talk about that one.
I'd
And then we'll shut it. I'll finish my beer.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the porter that Scott liked, but he preferred the Foul Play Stout, which I do too. So we wanted to create a beer that tasted like a s'more over the campfire. So we literally get a 40-pound box of graham cracker crumbs and toss that into the mash. So we have graham crackers in the mash, and then we use cacao nibs. That's our chocolate. So we're building a s'more here. We got the graham cracker, then we put that chocolate on there. Then we use cacao nibs. I want to say 10 pounds of their organic roasted cacao nibs also go into the mash. And my favorite way to incorporate chocolate into a beer is cacao in the mash. I think it brings out the most aroma without the bitterness of chocolate, because beer has enough bitterness from other ingredients. You don't need chocolate bitterness too. I don't like to boil cacao nibs. I like to put them in the mash. So we have graham and cacao nibs in the mash, and then we go to the boil. We add lactose, of course. So here we are again with a sweetness that we want to end up in the final thing. That's the marshmallow. So when it hits the fermenter, we let it ferment for a while, and then we add a whole... Oh, I'm giving away secrets here, so...
Oh, well, you don't have to.
So competitors, go ahead, because this is fun. But we, that Mexican vanilla that, when you take a cruise to Cancun, you get the Mexican vanilla. Well, you can also buy that at the bodeguita down the street. So we buy a 32-ounce Mexican vanilla and dump that in there too. So that's the marshmallow. So the lactose and that are the marshmallow. But finally, you have to cook that over the campfire. So we put a tiny, tiny touch of smoked grain in the mash bill as well. So we get a little campfire. And actually, I think the next time we make it, we're going to up the smoked grain, because the campfire is very subtle, but you can get it if you really concentrate. But we want to amp that up next time. So that's how we made a s'more in the glass. A s'more in the glass.
I think that's my next beer. I think I'm going to get a pint of that. It sounds delicious.
Yeah. It's sweet, so I actually don't love sweet beers that much. So I really like it, but I don't really want to have a whole glass of it. But I think you should have one for sure. But again, beer is a personal taste, and that's why making beer is like being an artist. You have an unlimited palette of ingredients, grains, hops, yeasts, adjuncts, whatever you want to do, fermentation temperatures, whatever you want to do. You can make whatever beer you want. So that's the cool thing about beer.
Awesome.
Had to get that in.
Well, Rose, you're an excellent evangelist for your brewery, first of all, but for craft beer in general. Your enthusiasm is contagious, and your talents and your team are wonderful. And I think that I speak for us other Hot Springs guys in saying that we're so glad that you're here.
Hey, thank you. I can talk about it all day long, but the efforts of my team and my 49 employees is what makes this place tick. So.
Holy crap!
Yep, 49. All of them.
Wow.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Well, keep it up, Rose.
Hey, thanks. Good to see you again.
Well, thanks again to Rose and to Scott and to Kelly. When I was growing up, Bathhouse Row and the rest of Hot Springs downtown went into decline. Most of the bathhouses sat empty for many years, some of them, starting to crumble into disrepair. But now, thanks to dedicated people like Rose and her team, the town and National Park are vibrant and busy and doing very well. It warms my heart as a hometown boy. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. It's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Mr. Root Beer Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. In the meantime, stay well and stay tuned. So long.